Anne Charlotte Linden stripped off her surgical gloves in the Seattle Memorial Hospital scrub room, her 14th hour finally ending. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, while betadine stained the sink water orange-brown. Her reflection in the steel faucet looked warped and exhausted. The November air slapped her face when she pushed through the hospital's rear exit. She'd chosen this route deliberately, avoiding colleagues who might trap her in conversation. Her mind craved silence after a day of beeping monitors and urgent surgical calls. Pike Street Station's entrance gaped 2 blocks away, yellow light spilling onto wet pavement. Anne Charlotte descended concrete steps carefully, her leather bag heavy with unread medical journals. The station smelled of ozone and metal, that particular underground scent of humanity compressed. The platform stretched nearly empty at this late hour, just scattered commuters along the yellow safety line. A businessman studied his phone while a teenager bobbed to music through headphones. The digital display announced the next train in 4 minutes, red numbers counting down. Movement caught her eye. A man in charcoal suit descending the opposite staircase with measured steps. His posture radiated control, shoulders squared with the confidence of someone accustomed to command. Dark hair swept back from sharp features she recognized instantly from photographs. Her breath stopped as memory flooded back. The private operating room at Cascade Private Clinic 6 months ago. The unmarked envelope stuffed with cash. The client requesting absolute discretion. Those photographs had shown this exact face from 12 angles, measurements precise to the millimeter. Ryan Holder reached the platform, expensive shoes clicking against tile as he moved toward the tracks. Anne Charlotte's medical training cataloged details automatically. The slight favor of his left leg, old injury. His right hand stayed near his coat, suggesting concealed weight underneath. Then she saw the second man, and ice water replaced her blood. He stood 30 feet down the platform, facing away but unmistakable in build and stance. The same charcoal suit, the same dark hair, the same controlled posture. Her surgical expertise recognized what others would miss, the precise jaw angles she'd personally sculpted. The second man shifted weight, profile emerging from shadow like a photograph developing. Her work made flesh, standing where Ryan couldn't see him yet. 8 hours she'd spent in that operating room, reshaping bone and cartilage to match specifications. The client had paid triple her usual fee for silence, claiming the reconstruction was for witness protection. She'd believed it because she'd needed to believe it, because the money had cleared her father's medical debts, because she'd been tired of night shifts and student loans crushing her future. Now her surgical precision had created something monstrous, a perfect copy designed for purposes she'd refused to imagine. The double stood motionless, waiting with predator patience. His stillness suggested training, military discipline transformed into criminal purpose. Ryan moved closer to the platform edge, oblivious to his reflection standing in human form. The double's right hand drifted toward his jacket, movement barely perceptible. Anne Charlotte's surgeon eye caught it, the gesture identical to Ryan's own habit, copied perfectly. Security cameras dotted the station ceiling, recording everything with blind mechanical indifference. Anne Charlotte realized they'd document her warning, link her to Ryan in ways that would end her anonymity. She was choosing visibility, trading safety for redemption she wasn't sure she deserved. The platform's yellow warning strip seemed to glow brighter, safety marker transformed into boundary between life and death. Ryan's foot crossed it slightly, balanced at the edge where trains roared past inches from passengers. One push would be enough, accident or murder indistinguishable in crowded chaos. Anne Charlotte noticed the double wore identical shoes to Ryan, same Italian leather, same subtle wear patterns. Someone had studied Ryan's life down to footwear choices, creating perfect visual duplicate. The attention to detail spoke of resources beyond ordinary criminal operation. A woman with stroller moved between Anne Charlotte and the staircase, blocking her direct path. The child inside fussed, mother pausing to adjust blankets with tired patience. Innocent lives surrounding lethal chess game. Civilians who'd become witnesses to violence they couldn't comprehend. The double's expression shifted microscopically, predator recognizing Anne Charlotte's awareness. Their eyes met across the platform for suspended instant, creator and creation acknowledging each other. She saw calculation in features she'd sculpted, intelligence measuring her threat level against mission parameters. Her mind raced through possibilities, puzzle pieces clicking together with horrifying clarity. If Ryan turned and saw his own face, the shock would freeze him for crucial seconds. The confusion would create perfect opportunity for execution. Witnesses thinking they'd seen the victim attack himself. The double's shoulders tensed, body language shifting from waiting to ready. Ryan was 10 steps away from turning the corner where his duplicate stood positioned. Anne Charlotte's hands gripped her bag strap, knuckles white against leather. The fluorescent station lights cast dual shadows from both men, creating visual confusion that blurred reality. Anne Charlotte's mind raced through medical scenarios, shock reactions, cardiac arrest from surprise, opportunities for violence in frozen moments. Her training cataloged dangers faster than conscious thought could process them. A train announcement echoed through the station, automated voice declaring arrivals and departures. The sound would mask gunshots perfectly, she realized with surgeon's grim practicality. Public spaces offered camouflage for violence, witnesses too distracted by their own concerns to notice murder unfolding. Ryan's phone buzzed in his pocket, vibration visible even from Anne Charlotte's distance. He ignored it, attention fixed on reaching the platform edge where trains arrived. The double's hand moved fractionally closer to his jacket, preparation becoming commitment. Anne Charlotte calculated distances with geometric precision. 30 feet to Ryan, 15 seconds at running speed, trajectory angles through crowds. Her legs tensed, body preparing for action before her mind fully committed. Surgical emergency protocols activated, transforming hesitation into decisive movement. The businessman nearby folded his newspaper, preparing to board arriving train. His movement would cross between Anne Charlotte and Ryan, blocking her path for crucial seconds. She had to move now, or lose the narrow window separating life from death. She'd taken an oath, first do no harm. But her scalpel had already carved harm into existence. Walking and breathing on this platform, her surgical skill had built a weapon, and now that weapon aimed at a man whose only crime was having a face worth copying. The distance closed to 8 steps. Ryan's hand reached for his phone. Attention diverted. The double's weight shifted forward onto his toes, coiled spring ready to release. Time stretched elastic, each second containing 1,000 small deaths of possibility. 6 months earlier, Anne Charlotte had stood in Cascade Private Clinic's sterile hallway, exhausted from another double shift. The head nurse had approached with unusual request: private client, off-books consultation, discretion absolutely required. The money offered could have covered 3 months of her father's experimental treatment. The consultation room had smelled of expensive leather and desperation masked by cologne. The client wore sunglasses indoors, voice pitched low as he'd spread photographs across mahogany table. 12 images of the same face, angles measured with architectural precision. He'd claimed witness protection, federal program requiring new identity for testimony against organized crime. The story had holes, but Anne Charlotte had been too tired to examine them carefully. Her father's oncology bills sat unpaid on her kitchen counter, red stamps screaming final notice. The photographs showed a face built for power: strong jaw, high cheekbones, eyes that commanded attention. Creating duplicate features would require advanced technique, bone restructuring beyond simple cosmetic adjustment. The client had nodded when she'd explained the complexity, then doubled his original offer. Anne Charlotte had requested consultation with anesthesiologist, but client insisted on bringing his own specialist. The man had arrived with credentials that checked out superficially, though his manner suggested military medicine rather than civilian practice. He'd worked in silence, asking no questions about the unusual procedure. The operating theater at Cascade Private Clinic had been pristine, equipment state-of-the-art, despite the facility's questionable legitimacy. Anne Charlotte remembered the quality of instruments, expensive tools that belonged in major research hospitals. Someone had invested serious resources into maintaining surgical excellence off the books. During preoperative planning, she'd noticed the client's hands, calloused in patterns suggesting firearms training, scarring consistent with violence. His eyes had tracked room exits automatically, never sitting with back to doors. Everything about him screamed criminal enterprise, yet she'd chosen blindness over acknowledgement. The patient himself had arrived sedated, wheeled in already unconscious from preoperative medications. Anne Charlotte never heard his voice, never learned his name beyond John Smith on forged paperwork. The anonymity had been deliberate, preventing human connection that might trigger conscience. She'd photographed her work extensively during surgery, documenting technique for what she'd told herself was professional portfolio building. Now she understood those photos served different purpose: evidence of her complicity, insurance against her talking. The client had copies, silent blackmail ensuring her continued silence. Anne Charlotte had requested medical history, previous surgeries, blood type, standard protocol for major reconstruction. The client had provided documents that looked legitimate, government seals embossed on letterhead. Everything had appeared official enough to silence her growing unease. She'd convinced herself the work served justice, protecting someone brave enough to testify. The rationalization had come easily at 3 a.m, standing in her father's hospital room. His morphine-dulled eyes had looked at her with trust she'd wanted desperately to deserve. The surgery had taken 8 hours of meticulous work, her hands steady despite moral uncertainty. She'd broken bone and reformed it, stretched skin and anchored it, carved cartilage into exact specifications. Her artistry had created perfection, a face indistinguishable from its photographic template. Recovery had required 3 weeks in the clinic's private wing, patient healing behind locked doors. Anne Charlotte had checked on him daily, watching her surgical work settle into permanent form. His face had emerged from swelling like sculpture revealed from marble. The client had paid final installment in cash, bills counted onto her desk in neat stacks. He'd requested all medical records be destroyed, claiming federal protocols for witness protection. She'd hesitated before feeding files into the industrial shredder, watching her work reduced to confetti. Her father had received his treatment 2 days later, experimental therapy that might buy him another year. Anne Charlotte had told herself the moral compromise was worth it, that saving her father justified bending rules. Sleep had come easier with his hospital bills marked paid in full, but doubt had lingered like phantom pain, nerves remembering something severed. The client had never returned for follow-up appointments, ignoring her calls about post-surgical assessment. The clinic's administrator had dismissed her concerns, citing patients' right to privacy and discontinue care. She'd tried researching witness protection procedures, finding nothing matching the process she'd experienced. Federal programs used legitimate hospitals, documented everything for legal protection. The secrecy surrounding her case had patterns wrong for government work. 3 months after surgery, she'd driven past Cascade Private Clinic to find it closed permanently. The building stood empty, windows dark, no forwarding contact information posted. Her unease had crystallized into certainty. She'd been used for purpose far from justice. The realization had come in fragments, pieces assembling into nightmare mosaic. Someone had wanted a perfect copy of another human being, duplicates so precise it could fool close associates. Only criminal enterprise needed such deception. Assassination plots requiring confusion for success. She'd created a weapon with her scalpel, turned her healing hands toward destruction. The knowledge had sat heavy in her chest for months, guilt compounding every time she performed legitimate surgery. Her oath mocked her. First do no harm, when harm already walked free wearing face she'd crafted. Anne Charlotte had tried locating the client, searching for way to undo damage or alert authorities. But the man had vanished completely, patient records destroyed, paper trail burned. She'd had no name for the face in photographs, no way to warn whoever that person might be. Now she stood on Pike Street Station platform, watching her surgical sin prepare to execute its true purpose. The patient she'd rebuilt stood waiting to murder the template she'd copied him from. Her hands had built this trap, scalpel creating the perfect assassin's disguise. Anne Charlotte's legs moved before her mind finished processing, bag sliding from shoulder as she broke into run. Her sensible work shoes slapped against tile, sound echoing through the underground space. The businessman looked up startled as she sprinted past him toward the stairs. Ryan Holder was 5 steps from turning the corner where his double waited. Anne Charlotte's lungs burned as she pushed harder, medical training screaming that she was too far away. The distance felt infinite, stretched by adrenaline into impossible geometry. She reached the staircase base as Ryan's foot touched the 3rd step from bottom. Her hand shot out, but stopped inches from his shoulder, professional instinct preventing unexpected touch. Instead, her voice cut through station noise, sharp and urgent as surgical steel. "Don't look back." The words came out breathless but clear, pitched low enough for only him. Ryan froze mid-step, muscle memory responding to command's absolute certainty. His hand tightened on the metal rail, knuckles going white against industrial steel. Anne Charlotte moved beside him carefully, positioning her body between Ryan and the platform below. She kept her eyes forward, avoiding the mistake she was warning him against. Her peripheral vision caught the double's form shifting, predator sensing disrupted opportunity. "Keep walking up, slowly. Don't turn your head." Her surgeon's voice carried the same tone she used in operating rooms during crisis. Ryan's jaw clenched, but he obeyed, taking another step upward. His hand trembled against the rail, betraying the control his face maintained. The double moved on the platform below, shoes clicking as he stepped toward the staircase. Charlotte heard the sound and felt Ryan tense beside her, every instinct telling him to confront the threat. She shifted closer, blocking his view downward with her body. "Someone down there looks exactly like you, and if you see him, you're dead." The explanation came in whispered rush as they climbed. Ryan's breath hitched, the only sign her words had penetrated. His expensive suit brushed against her scrubs as they moved in synchronized descent. The double's footsteps quickened below, his carefully laid trap unraveling. Charlotte risked a glance back and saw him standing at staircase bottom, Ryan's face, twisted with frustrated calculation. The surgical precision of her work stared back at her, living accusation. Ryan reached the upper landing, hand still gripping rail like anchor. Charlotte pressed close behind him, using her smaller frame to maintain barrier between original and copy. The station's exit beckoned 20 feet away, salvation measured in concrete yards. "Emergency exit right. Move fast, but don't run." Her instructions kept coming, surgical procedure applied to escape. Ryan nodded once, sharp movement of understanding. His training matched hers, both accustomed to crisis, to performing under pressure that crushed ordinary people. They turned toward the emergency door together, Charlotte's hand finally touching his elbow to guide. The contact felt electric, connection forged through shared danger. Behind them, the double's footsteps hit the stairs, beginning pursuit with mechanical determination. Ryan pushed through the emergency door, alarm shrieking as they entered a concrete stairwell. The sound covered their footsteps as they took stairs 2 at a time. Charlotte's legs burned, but she kept pace, adrenaline overriding exhaustion from her hospital shift. The stairwell smelled of mildew and neglect, emergency route rarely used. Flickering fluorescent tubes cast seizure-inducing light over concrete walls covered in decade-old graffiti. Ryan moved with surprising grace for his size, clearly familiar with rapid tactical withdrawal. They burst through a street-level door into alley behind the station, cold air hitting like baptism. Ryan finally turned to face her, and Charlotte saw recognition dawn in his eyes. Not of her personally, but of the situation's twisted logic. Someone had gone to surgical lengths to kill him. "You need to explain now." His voice was calm, despite the tremor still visible in his hands. Charlotte met his gaze and saw intelligence analyzing, calculating, planning. This was a man accustomed to danger, but not danger wearing his own face. "I'm the surgeon who created him." The confession tore out of her, guilt and fear mixed. Ryan's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes, understanding complicated by new variables. His hand moved away from his coat, no longer seeking the weapon she'd known was there. The alley stretched narrow between brick buildings, dumpsters creating shadows that moved with the wind. Ryan's breathing stayed controlled despite the sprint, military discipline evident in how quickly he'd recovered. Charlotte leaned against cold brick, her surgical scrubs offering no protection against November's bite. Distant sounds of the station filtered through alley's narrow mouth, train departures, passenger announcements, ordinary city rhythm continuing oblivious to attempted murder. Charlotte's professional detachment crumbled as delayed shock set in, hands trembling with adrenaline aftermath. She'd just saved a stranger's life using knowledge from her greatest mistake. Ryan's eyes swept the alley systematically, threat assessment never truly ending. Charlotte recognized the behavior from trauma surgeons. Hypervigilance burned into nervous system through repeated danger. He existed in constant tactical evaluation, calculating angles and exits even during apparent safety. The brick wall behind her still held days-absorbed heat, warmth bleeding through cold night air. Charlotte pressed against it, grounding herself through physical sensation. Her surgical training emphasized staying calm during crisis, but that composure was fracturing under weight of consequences. Ryan's phone buzzed again, multiple messages arriving in rapid sequence. He glanced at screen briefly, expression darkening at whatever information appeared. His organization was reacting to the failed hit, intelligence network mobilizing in response to threat against their leader. Charlotte noticed details her panicked mind had missed during initial escape. Ryan's watch was platinum, subtle wealth statement. His shirt was custom-tailored, fabric quality visible even in alley's dim light. He existed in a world of expensive surfaces hiding violent depths, luxury concealing brutality. 6 months ago, a man came to me with your photographs. Her voice shook slightly, as exhaustion and adrenaline withdrawal hit simultaneously. Ryan's eyes narrowed, processing this information with the speed of someone used to betrayal. His hand remained visible, away from the weapon she knew he carried. He said it was witness protection, federal program needing facial reconstruction. The words tumbled out faster now, confession gaining momentum. Ryan's jaw tightened, but he stayed silent, letting her continue. The alley's darkness hid his full expression, but his posture radiated dangerous focus. I needed money for my father's cancer treatment. Experimental therapy insurance wouldn't cover. Anne Charlotte heard the weakness in her own justification, the hollow sound of rationalization crumbling. Ryan shifted his weight, considering whether to believe her, or whether she was part of the larger conspiracy. The clinic was Cascade Private, closed down 3 months after the surgery. She pushed off the wall, needing movement to contain the nervous energy flooding her system. Ryan's eyes tracked her motion, predator assessing prey, deciding if she represented threat or tool. Sirens wailed in the distance, possibly responding to the emergency exit alarm they'd triggered. Ryan glanced toward the alley's mouth, calculating escape routes with practiced efficiency. His focus split between immediate danger and the larger picture she was painting. How precise was the match? His first question cut to the tactical heart of the situation. Anne Charlotte recognized the intelligence in his query. He needed to know if casual acquaintances could tell them apart. Her medical expertise suddenly became strategic asset rather than shameful confession. Bone structure identical, soft tissue mapped exactly, even minor asymmetries replicated. She answered clinically, falling into professional assessment mode. Ryan absorbed this, understanding crystallizing in his expression. A perfect copy meant the double could infiltrate his organization, stand beside his closest associates undetected. The plan required you to see him, create confusion in the critical moment. Anne Charlotte's surgical mind had reconstructed the assassination strategy during their flight. Ryan nodded slowly, appreciating the elegance of a trap that used his own face as weapon. The double would have waited for eye contact, for that instant of recognition where Ryan's brain stuttered trying to process the impossible. In that frozen moment, a bullet or blade would end the original, leaving witnesses who'd seen 2 identical men. Chaos would provide cover for escape. Who paid for this? Ryan's second question carried weight of someone mapping enemy territory. Anne Charlotte shook her head, frustration evident in the gesture. The client had been ghost, leaving no trace beyond cash and forged documents. He vanished completely, took all records with him. Her failure to identify the architect stung professionally and personally. Ryan studied her face, searching for deception or complicity. Whatever he saw there must have satisfied him, because his stance relaxed fractionally. You're either extraordinarily brave or colossally stupid, warning me. His assessment landed somewhere between gratitude and suspicion. Anne Charlotte met his gaze directly, refusing to flinch from the intensity she found there. I took an oath. First, do no harm. The words sounded naive even to her own ears. Ryan's mouth twisted, something that might have been humor in different circumstances. His world clearly operated by different rules than Hippocratic principles. That oath died when you took the money. His bluntness cut cleanly. Surgical precision turned against her. Anne Charlotte felt the truth of it, the way good intentions had paved her road toward complicity. She'd known something was wrong, and chosen willful blindness. I know. The admission cost her, stripping away the last comfortable lies she'd told herself. Ryan seemed to appreciate the honesty, the lack of continued justification or excuse-making. His evaluation of her shifted visibly, recalculating her value beyond simple pawn. A car passed the alley entrance, headlights briefly illuminating their position. Both pressed back against the brick instinctively, sharing the reflex toward concealment. The moment of synchronized movement created strange intimacy between them. He's still in the station, probably calling for backup. Ryan's tactical mind was already 3 moves ahead. Anne Charlotte realized she'd committed herself irrevocably. The double had seen her interfere, making her target alongside Ryan. Her surgical skills had bound her fate to his. I can identify him definitively. Details only the operating surgeon would know. She offered her expertise like bargaining chip, though she suspected Ryan had already calculated her usefulness. His slight nod confirmed he'd been waiting to see if she'd volunteer the information. Ryan moved toward the alley's far end, gesturing for Anne Charlotte to follow. His movements carried urban familiarity, someone who knew Seattle's hidden geography. She hurried after him, medical bag abandoned somewhere in Pike Street Station with her old life. Service tunnels run beneath this district, built during Prohibition. His voice stayed low as they reached a rusted metal door. Ryan produced a small tool from his pocket, picking the lock with practiced efficiency. The door swung open on protesting hinges. Darkness gaped beyond the threshold, carrying scent of stagnant water and decay. Ryan pulled a small flashlight from inside his jacket, beam cutting through blackness. Concrete steps descended into underground Warren. Anne Charlotte had never known existed beneath familiar streets. They descended single file, Ryan leading with sure steps that suggested prior knowledge of these passages. Anne Charlotte's hand trailed along damp wall, condensation soaking through her surgical scrubs. The temperature dropped with each step, Earth's cold breath rising to meet them. The tunnel stretched ahead when they reached bottom, brick archway disappearing into shadow. Water dripped somewhere in the distance, rhythmic as heartbeat. Ryan moved forward confidently, his flashlight revealing ancient infrastructure forgotten by modern city. You rebuilt his entire face? Ryan's question echoed off brick walls. Anne Charlotte confirmed, explaining the extent of surgical reconstruction required. She described breaking cheekbones and resetting them, reshaping cartilage, grafting tissue to match exact specifications. Ryan listened without interrupting, his tactical mind cataloging details. Anne Charlotte realized he was building profile of his enemy, understanding the resources required for such operation. The client had money, connections, access to skilled surgeon willing to work off books. The recovery alone would take months. Ryan's observation was correct. Facial reconstruction couldn't be rushed without risking complications. Anne Charlotte confirmed the 3-week supervised recovery, explaining tissue healing and swelling reduction. Ryan processed this, calculating timeline backward from tonight's attempted assassination. So this was planned at least 7 months ago, probably longer for the preliminary work. His strategic thinking impressed her despite the circumstances. Someone had been positioning pieces carefully, waiting for exact right moment. The patient suggested professional operation, not crime of passion. The tunnel forked ahead, and Ryan chose left passage without hesitation. Anne Charlotte wondered how he knew these routes, what kind of life required familiarity with underground escape paths. His expensive suit seemed incongruous against the dripping brickwork and rat-gnawed debris. Who wants you dead this badly? She asked the question that had been building since the platform. Ryan's silence stretched long enough she thought he might not answer. His flashlight beam wavered slightly, only visible sign the question had landed. Could be Russian syndicate, rival family, or someone inside my own organization. His answer contained layers of complexity Anne Charlotte couldn't parse. She'd known he was dangerous, but the casual mention of multiple murder conspiracies painted picture beyond her understanding. Someone with surgical precision in planning. Anne Charlotte's medical metaphor felt appropriate given the circumstances. Ryan glanced back at her, and she caught brief smile in the flashlight's backwash. Dark humor shared between unlikely allies. The tunnel opened into larger chamber, old speakeasy or storage room from Prohibition era. Wooden barrels rotted against walls, and broken furniture created obstacle course across floor. Ryan crossed carefully, testing boards before putting full weight down. Graffiti covered the chamber walls in layers, decades of trespassers leaving marks in spray paint and marker. Anne Charlotte recognized gang symbols mixed with teenage declarations. Urban archaeology documenting the city's hidden social history. The newest tags looked months old, suggesting even criminals had abandoned these depths. Ryan's flashlight beam caught something metallic in the corner. Old Prohibition-era safe, door hanging open on rusted hinges. Empty liquor bottles littered the floor nearby, glass thick with dust that hadn't been disturbed in years. The space felt like tomb, preserving moment from Seattle's lawless past. Water damage had weakened the ceiling in places, chunks of concrete hanging precariously overhead. Anne Charlotte walked carefully around the danger zones Ryan indicated with his light. One collapse could trap them here, buried alive in forgotten infrastructure beneath oblivious city streets above. The air quality shifted as they moved deeper, staleness giving way to fresher circulation from unknown source. Ryan followed the airflow instinctively, using it to navigate toward exit. His comfort in this environment unsettled Anne Charlotte. How many times had he fled through these tunnels before tonight? Something skittered in the darkness beyond their light. Rats or other creatures claiming the underground as territory. Anne Charlotte suppressed shudder, focusing on following Ryan's footsteps exactly. The tunnel seemed endless, time distorting in the absence of natural reference points. We can't stay in the tunnels. They'll have people searching within the hour. His assessment carried certainty of experience. Anne Charlotte felt the weight of pursuit, the net closing around them. She'd become fugitive in the space of 20 minutes, life transforming beyond recognition. Where can we go? Her question revealed her complete dependence on his expertise. Ryan studied her in the flashlight's glow, making decision about trust and utility. His expression suggested he was still calculating whether she was asset or liability. I have a place. Warehouse district near the harbor. Ryan moved toward another exit, this one leading upward. Anne Charlotte followed, committing herself further with each step. She'd cross lines tonight that couldn't be uncrossed. Professional ethics shattered beyond repair. They emerged through basement access and abandoned building, street-level windows boarded over. Ryan checked the exit carefully before pushing through, scanning for surveillance or ambush. The street outside sat empty, industrial zone quiet in late evening. A black car waited 3 blocks away, keys hidden in wheel well, where Ryan retrieved them. Anne Charlotte slid into passenger seat, leather cold against her scrubs. Ryan started engine smoothly, pulling into traffic with unremarkable precision. The warehouse sat dark among similar structures, Harbor Island's industrial skeleton visible against night sky. Ryan parked behind the building, accessing through door that looked rusted shut, but opened smoothly. Security measures disguised as decay, Anne Charlotte realized as they entered. Inside, the space contradicted its exterior. Clean concrete floors, functional lighting activated by Ryan's phone app. A living area occupied one corner, surprisingly comfortable furniture surrounding expensive electronics. The setup spoke of someone maintaining multiple safe houses across the city. Bathrooms there if you need it. Ryan gestured toward a door while moving to check security monitors. Anne Charlotte saw her reflection in darkened window and barely recognized herself. Hair disheveled, scrub-stained, eyes wild with adrenaline aftermath. She looked like someone who'd made catastrophic life choices. She washed her face in the small bathroom, cold water shocking her system back toward clarity. Her hands shook as exhaustion finally crashed through adrenaline's protective barrier. The surgeon who'd left Seattle Memorial 6 hours ago felt like a different person entirely. When she emerged, Ryan had removed his jacket and rolled up sleeves. Blood darkened his left forearm where glass from the emergency exit had apparently cut through fabric. He was examining the wound with clinical detachment, pressing edges to assess depth. "Let me see that." Anne Charlotte's medical training overrode everything else. Ryan hesitated, instinctive distrust warring with practical need. His eyes met hers, searching for something before he extended his arm. The cut ran 3 inches long, deep enough to require attention, but not life-threatening. Anne Charlotte examined it with gentle fingers, surgical expertise cataloging damage automatically. Ryan's skin was warm under her touch, pulse strong and steady despite recent events. "You have medical supplies here?" she asked, already knowing someone like him would. Ryan nodded toward cabinet, and she found comprehensive first aid kit. The supplies were professional grade, not drugstore purchases. Trauma shears, sutures, antiseptics designed for serious injury. She cleaned the wound carefully, Ryan watching her hands work with quiet intensity. The intimacy of medical care created strange moment between them, trust formed through necessity. Her fingers moved with practiced precision, habits ingrained through years of surgical training. The antiseptic smell brought Anne Charlotte back to familiar territory, medical ritual grounding her despite surreal circumstances. Ryan's skin temperature felt normal under her touch. No signs of shock despite the violence he'd just survived. His physiological control matched his emotional restraint, body disciplined like his mind. She noticed scars on his forearm as she worked, old knife wound, bullet graze, burn mark from something cylindrical. Each told story of survival, violence survived, and lessons learned. His body was map of dangerous life, tissue remembering trauma, even when memory tried to forget. Ryan's breathing remained steady throughout the procedure, meditation technique or pain tolerance Anne Charlotte couldn't determine. Most patients flinched during suturing, instinctive reaction to needle-piercing flesh. His stillness was unnatural, learned behavior from necessity rather than natural inclination. The warehouse's industrial heating kicked on, metal ducts clanking as warmth circulated through the space. Anne Charlotte welcomed the temperature rise, surgical scrubs inadequate for prolonged cold exposure. The domestic sound contrasted sharply with the clinical procedure she was performing. She found herself hyper-aware of proximity, the scent of his cologne mixed with copper blood, the sound of his breathing inches from her ear. Professional boundaries felt simultaneously essential and absurd, given everything they'd survived together. Her hands trembled slightly as she tied final knot. "This needs stitches." Anne Charlotte prepared suture kit, threading needle with steady hands. Ryan nodded acceptance, no fear visible in his expression. She'd treated hundreds of wounds, but something about this felt different. Personal responsibility mixing with professional duty. The first stitch pierced skin, and Ryan didn't flinch. Anne Charlotte worked carefully, creating small, even stitches that would heal cleanly. Her work represented opposite of what she'd done 6 months ago. This healed rather than created weapon. "You're good at this." Ryan's observation carried weight beyond simple compliment. Anne Charlotte focused on the stitching, using the familiar task to steady herself. The repetitive motion grounded her, medical ritual providing anchor in surreal situation. "I trained at Johns Hopkins, specialized in reconstructive surgery." She heard herself offering personal history, filling silence with information. Ryan absorbed this, adding details to whatever profile he was building of her. His attention felt heavy, assessing beyond surface competency. She tied off final stitch, trimming excess thread with precise cut. The wound looked clean now, edges aligned properly for optimal healing. Ryan examined her work, flexing his arm experimentally. Satisfaction crossed his features, approval given grudgingly but genuinely. "Thank you." The words carried layers. Gratitude for the warning, for the medical care, possibly for not letting him die on that platform. Anne Charlotte met his gaze and saw complexity there, danger mixed with something approaching respect. Her hands trembled now that the task was complete, delayed reaction flooding through her system. Ryan noticed, his expression shifting toward something almost gentle. He moved to the kitchen area, returning with glass of water. "Drink this, then you should rest." His tone carried command softened by concern. Anne Charlotte accepted the glass, water cold and clean against her throat. The simple act of hydration reminded her body of its needs: food, sleep, safety she no longer had. What happens now? Her question encompassed everything: the immediate threat, the larger conspiracy, her own impossible position. Ryan settled into chair across from her, studying her with calculating expression that made her simultaneously nervous and strangely safe. Ryan moved to his laptop, fingers typing commands that brought multiple screens to life. Security camera feeds flickered across monitors, showing various angles of warehouse exterior and surrounding streets. His setup rivaled anything Anne Charlotte had seen in hospital security offices, technology deployed with professional precision. "I have contacts throughout the city, people who owe favors or sell information." Ryan's explanation came while he typed messages into encrypted channels. Anne Charlotte watched code scroll past, realizing how deeply he was embedded in Seattle's hidden infrastructure. His reach extended far beyond what his expensive suit suggested. The double will need to report failure, regroup with whoever hired him. Ryan's strategic thinking mapped enemy movements like chess pieces. Anne Charlotte understood the logic. The failed assassination meant conspirators would scramble, potentially making mistakes. Desperation created opportunities for those patient enough to wait. Within 10 minutes, responses began appearing on Ryan's screens. Street cameras near Pike Street Station showed the double leaving through main entrance 20 minutes after their escape. His posture radiated controlled fury, plans demolished by unexpected interference. "There," Anne Charlotte pointed at the screen, medical expertise catching details others might miss. The double's right hand hung slightly different than Ryan's, compensation for surgical trauma she'd inflicted. The asymmetry was microscopic, but diagnostic to her trained eye. Ryan enlarged the image, studying his own face worn by another man. Anne Charlotte watched him process the violation, seeing himself as weapon wielded by enemies. The psychological impact went beyond simple assassination attempt. Someone had stolen his identity, turned his face into instrument of murder. The hand position, "You notice that?" She explained the subtle difference, how surgical reconstruction created patterns invisible to casual observation. Ryan absorbed this information, recognizing her expertise as tactical advantage. She could identify the double definitively where others would see only identical twins. "He's heading toward Pioneer Square." Ryan tracked the figure through sequential camera feeds. His fingers moved rapidly, accessing systems Anne Charlotte suspected weren't legally obtained. The double moved with purpose, suggesting rendezvous point or safe house in that direction. Ryan made phone call, conversation conducted in terse phrases that revealed nothing to listening ears. He hung up after 30 seconds, attention returning to the monitors. Someone was moving pieces on his behalf, extending his reach beyond this warehouse. "My people are watching the square now." Ryan's network operated with military efficiency. Anne Charlotte felt the weight of the organization behind him, resources she'd only glimpsed. Saving his life had tied her to machinery far larger than she'd understood. The double appeared on new camera feed, entering building off Washington Street. Ryan zoomed in, capturing the address with screenshot. He cross-referenced it against database, pulling property records and ownership information within seconds. Front company, registered to Shell Corporation in Delaware. Ryan's research skills matched his tactical planning. Anne Charlotte saw layers of deception peeling back, revealing infrastructure built for illegal operations. The building housed something worth hiding behind legal barriers. 3 other people entering in the last hour. Ryan played back footage, showing different individuals converging on the location. None were familiar to Anne Charlotte, but Ryan's expression darkened as he recognized faces. These were players in his world, pieces on the board moving against him. Dmitry Volkov's lieutenant, Paulo Mendez from the Southern Network, and that's Kenji Tanaka. Ryan identified them with the certainty of someone who studied his enemies constantly. Anne Charlotte heard the international scope in those names, conspiracy reaching beyond local crime into global connections. They're forming coalition. Ryan's assessment carried grim recognition. The coordination required to create surgical double and position these players meant months of planning. Someone had united disparate factions against common enemy, him. Anne Charlotte watched the screens, seeing her surgical work at the center of geopolitical conspiracy. The double was keystone, physical manifestation of alliance between groups that normally competed. Her scalpel had carved the glue-holding enemy coalition together. Why you? She asked the question that had been building. Ryan leaned back, considering how much to reveal. His eyes held calculation, weighing her need to know against operational security. I control harbor access, which means I control what comes into Seattle illegally. His explanation simplified complex power dynamics. Anne Charlotte understood the implication. Drugs, weapons, human trafficking, all flowed through checkpoints Ryan commanded. Removing him would open floodgates for competitors. But it's more than business, Ryan continued, voice dropping. Anne Charlotte heard personal element beneath strategic assessment. Someone in that building had reason beyond profit, vendetta mixed with opportunity. Volkov's brother died in my territory 2 years ago. Drug deal gone wrong. Ryan's confession carried weight of history. Anne Charlotte saw how violence begat violence, cycles of revenge spinning beyond original causes. The double represented Volkov's patience, waiting for perfect moment to strike. The others joined because removing me benefits everyone. Ryan's self-awareness was clinical, no ego-clouding assessment. He understood his own position as obstacle to competitors' expansion. The coalition made brutal sense once she saw the board clearly. New movement on the screens drew their attention. Black SUV pulling up outside the Washington Street building. 2 men emerged, carrying equipment cases. Ryan's posture tensed, recognizing significance Anne Charlotte couldn't parse. Cleanup crew. Ryan's identification sent chill through her. The men moved with professional efficiency, suggesting they performed this service regularly. Whatever was about to happen in that building required evidence disposal afterward. They're planning another attempt tonight. Ryan stood, decision crystallizing in his expression. Anne Charlotte felt fear spike. He intended to confront them directly, walk into building full of enemies. Her medical mind cataloged all the ways this could end badly. You can't go there alone. Her protest emerged automatically. Ryan turned to her, something almost like warmth in his dangerous eyes. He appreciated the concern even as he dismissed its practicality. I won't be alone. Ryan made 3 more phone calls, each brief and coded. His organization mobilized in response, pieces moving to counter enemy positions. Anne Charlotte witnessed command structure activating, realized she'd underestimated the scale of his operation. Ryan changed clothes methodically, replacing suit with dark tactical gear from locked cabinet. Anne Charlotte watched transformation from businessman to operator, seeing the violence underneath civilized veneer. He moved with practiced efficiency, checking weapons and equipment with ritual precision. Stay here. Monitors will show you what's happening. Ryan handed her tablet connected to his surveillance network. Anne Charlotte wanted to protest but recognized her limitations. She was surgeon, not soldier. Her value lay in identification, not confrontation. If something goes wrong, she started, but Ryan interrupted with slight smile. His confidence bordered on arrogance, but she suspected it was earned through survival of previous impossible situations. He'd walked through fires before, and emerged smoking but alive. If I don't return by dawn, there's an envelope in the desk with instructions. Ryan's contingency planning was thorough. Anne Charlotte nodded, throat tight with emotions she couldn't name. He'd become important to her survival, but also something more. Connection forged in crisis transcending simple necessity. Ryan left through warehouse's rear exit, disappearing into Harbor Island's darkness. Anne Charlotte watched his departure on tablet screen, feeling helpless in ways her surgical training never prepared her for. She couldn't stitch this situation closed with needle and thread. The tablet showed multiple feeds as Ryan moved through streets toward Pioneer Square. Other figures appeared on parallel routes, Ryan's people converging on target location. The coordination impressed her. Silent communication, perfect timing, pieces sliding into position like surgical instruments on sterile tray. Ryan reached buildings adjacent alley, pausing to survey approaches. Anne Charlotte's medical knowledge made her hyper-aware of vulnerability. Arteries close to skin surface, organs unprotected beneath clothing, fragility of human body despite its resilience. She'd seen too many trauma cases to maintain illusions about mortality. Movement on different screen caught her attention, the double emerging onto building's roof. Anne Charlotte's breath stopped as she watched her surgical creation scan surroundings. Even through camera's limited resolution, she recognized the posture she'd studied during post-operative assessments. Ryan's team moved with synchronized precision, entering building from 3 different points. Muzzle flashes lit windows briefly, sounds too distant for tablet's microphone to capture. Anne Charlotte's hands gripped device tightly, surgical control abandoned to raw anxiety. The double moved to roof's edge, looking down at chaos erupting below. Anne Charlotte saw his tactical assessment, recognizing intelligence behind familiar features. Whoever this man was before her surgery, he'd been trained professionally. Military or intelligence background, evident in his economical movements. Ryan appeared on different screen, inside building's main corridor. Bodies littered floor behind him. Unconscious or dead, Anne Charlotte couldn't tell. He moved toward stairwell access, hunting upward toward roof where the double waited. Anne Charlotte wanted to warn him but had no communication channel. She watched helplessly as Ryan climbed, each step taking him closer to confrontation with his own face. The psychological warfare inherent in the design became clear. Fighting yourself created hesitation, split-second delays that could prove fatal. The double drew weapon, positioning himself behind roof access door. Classic ambush setup, waiting for target to emerge vulnerable. Anne Charlotte's surgeon mind calculated bullet trajectories, imagined damage to Ryan's body with clinical horror. But Ryan didn't emerge through the door. Instead, he appeared from roof's opposite side, having access through external fire escape. The double's trap collapsed, advantage evaporating. Anne Charlotte released breath she hadn't known she was holding. The confrontation happened too fast for tablet's refresh rate to capture clearly. Blurred motion, struggle, weapon discharging toward sky. Anne Charlotte saw the double's advantage. He knew Ryan's movements because they shared muscle memory, surgical reconstruction including behavioral patterns studied through extensive surveillance. Ryan adapted, breaking expected patterns with deliberate unpredictability. His training outmatched the double's preparation, experience trumping mimicry. The fight was brutal and efficient. 2 nearly identical figures locked in lethal dance. The double broke away, running toward roof's far edge. Anne Charlotte realized his escape route, building backed onto waterfront, dock extending into Elliott Bay. He reached the edge and dove without hesitation, form perfect as he disappeared from camera view. Ryan reached edge seconds later, looking down at dark water. Anne Charlotte switched to different camera angle, showing dock below. The double surfaced briefly, before disappearing under pier structure. Waterborne escape, planned contingency for failed operation. Ryan's team secured buildings systematically, clearing rooms and restraining survivors. Anne Charlotte counted 7 hostiles down, mix of coalition members and support personnel. The cleanup crew had fled during initial assault, equipment abandoned in their haste. Ryan descended from roof, checking casualties with professional detachment. He stopped at one body, searching pockets and extracting phone. Intelligence gathered from fallen enemies, pieces of puzzle collected even in victory's aftermath. The tablet showed Ryan exiting building, regrouping with his team. Brief conversation ensued, orders given with hand signals Anne Charlotte couldn't interpret. His people dispersed into night, leaving scene clean of obvious evidence. Ryan returned to warehouse 40 minutes later, tactical gear bloodied but expression calm. Anne Charlotte examined him automatically, checking for injuries beyond superficial cuts. He allowed the inspection patiently, understanding her need to verify his survival. He escaped into the bay. Ryan's report was matter of fact, tactical setback accepted without excessive emotion. Anne Charlotte understood the implications. The double remained operational, threat continuing. Her surgical creation still walked free, purpose unfulfilled, but not abandoned. "I found something." Ryan retrieved phone from his pocket, scrolling through encrypted messages. Anne Charlotte read over his shoulder, seeing coded references and coordinates. Planning extended beyond tonight's attempt. Multiple contingencies prepared. They have secondary location, backup plan if the double failed. Ryan's discovery meant the threat was far from over. Anne Charlotte felt exhaustion crash through her, adrenaline completely depleted. She'd been awake nearly 24 hours, functioning on crisis energy that couldn't sustain much longer. Ryan noticed her swaying, fatigue breaking through determination. His hand steadied her elbow, surprising gentleness from someone who'd just killed multiple people. The contradiction defined him. Brutal when necessary, capable of care when circumstance allowed. "Sleep. We'll deal with this tomorrow." Ryan guided her toward small bedroom off the main space. Anne Charlotte wanted to argue, but her body betrayed her. Desperate for rest, she collapsed onto bed still wearing surgical scrubs, consciousness fading before she could process the day's impossible events. 21 days passed in careful routine, Anne Charlotte staying at the warehouse while Ryan hunted leads through Seattle's underworld. She'd called hospital with family emergency excuse, buying time off that would probably cost her position. Professional life seemed distant abstraction compared to survival's immediate demands. Ryan's organization had located the secondary safe house, raiding it to find only empty rooms and erased hard drives. The coalition had scattered after their failure, members returning to respective territories, but the double remained invisible, vanished into whatever network had created him. Anne Charlotte spent hours studying her surgical notes, reconstructed from memory since original files were destroyed. She documented every detail of the facial reconstruction, cataloging microscopic tells that could identify her creation. The work obsessed her, penance through precision. Ryan returned each evening with updates, their conversations evolving from tactical necessity to something resembling companionship. He listened when she talked about her father's death 3 weeks after the surgery, the cancer winning despite experimental treatment. Her sacrifice had bought nothing but guilt, money spent on empty hope. She learned about his life in fragments, orphaned at 12, raised in foster system until street offered better prospects. He'd built empire through intelligence and ruthlessness, carved space in criminal ecosystem through strategic brilliance. His hands were bloodstained, but his word was iron. Reputation for honoring agreements absolute. Something unspoken developed between them. Connection forged through shared danger and forced proximity. Anne Charlotte caught him watching her sometimes, expression unguarded, seeing beyond the surgeon who'd accidentally created his nemesis. She wondered what he saw, if it matched who she'd become. The break came on day 22. Facial recognition hit from camera at SeaTac Airport. The double attempting to leave country, traveling under forged passport. Ryan's contacts alerted him within minutes, opportunity emerging from patient surveillance. They drove to airport together, Anne Charlotte insisting her identification expertise was necessary. Ryan had argued briefly before accepting the logic, needing certainty before acting. The double could blend into crowds, disappear if they grabbed wrong person. The terminal bustled with evening travelers, families and business people flowing toward gates. Anne Charlotte scanned faces methodically, surgical pattern recognition processing features at unconscious speed. Ryan stayed close, hand near concealed weapon, ready for violence if circumstances demanded. She spotted him near international gates, wearing baseball cap and glasses that obscured features. But posture was unmistakable, the slight hand asymmetry visible even through crowd. Anne Charlotte gripped Ryan's arm, directing his attention with subtle gesture. The double must have sensed scrutiny because he turned, eyes meeting theirs across terminal. Recognition flashed. He knew her as his surgeon, knew Ryan as his target. For suspended moment, original and copy faced each other while creator watched her work made flesh. Then security appeared from 3 directions. Plainclothes officers moving with coordinated purpose. Ryan had called ahead, arranged law enforcement response through connections Anne Charlotte couldn't fathom. The double saw the trap closing, calculated odds, and surrendered without resistance. The arrest happened quietly, professional efficiency minimizing scene. The double was led away in handcuffs while travelers flowed around them obliviously. Anne Charlotte watched him go, seeing the end of her surgical nightmare. Ryan's hand found hers, squeeze communicating relief and gratitude. Federal agents took custody within hours, coalition conspiracy expanding into international investigation. Volkov and his lieutenants faced charges that would ensure decades in prison. Ryan's testimony would be required eventually, though his lawyers would negotiate immunity for cooperation. The media coverage was carefully managed. Ryan's name kept out of official reports through connections Charlotte didn't fully understand. She read sanitized versions in newspapers, stories about international crime syndicate, without mentioning the surgical deception at its heart. Her role remained invisible, protected by same machinery that made Ryan untouchable. Her colleagues at Seattle Memorial noticed changes she couldn't articulate: new hesitation before surgery, double-checking patient identities obsessively. The chief of surgery attributed it to burnout, recommending continued therapy she attended but never fully engaged with. Some truths couldn't be shared with civilian psychologists bound by mandatory reporting. Ryan had offered protection detail, discreet security shadowing her movements through city streets. Charlotte had declined initially, then accepted after recognizing her naivety about remaining threats. The coalition's collapse didn't mean all enemies were neutralized, grudges outlasting organizational structures. She visited her father's grave weekly, conversations with Tombstone replacing the ones she'd never have again. Charlotte told him about the choices made in his name, money that had bought nothing but complicated guilt. His silence felt like judgment or forgiveness depending on her mood. The Cascade Private Clinics building had been demolished, land sold to developers planning luxury condominiums. Charlotte had driven past during destruction, watching her past literally crumble into rubble. No evidence remained of the surgery performed there, except living proof walking through world and sitting in federal prison. Charlotte returned to hospital 3 days later. Resignation letter drafted but unsubmitted. The chief of surgery listened to her edited explanation. Personal crisis, family emergency, temporary leave needed. He granted 6-month sabbatical, recognizing talent worth preserving despite mysterious absence. She moved from warehouse to small apartment in Capitol Hill, space of her own, while maintaining connection to Ryan. He visited regularly, their relationship evolving into something neither could quite define. Romance seemed inadequate word for bond forged through survival and redemption. The package arrived 4 weeks after the airport arrest, plain brown box with no return address. Charlotte opened it carefully, finding photograph of the double, prison mugshot showing defeated expression. Beneath it, handwritten note in Ryan's precise script. You saved me twice, once on the platform, once by creating evidence that convicted them all. Your surgical precision documented every detail they needed. You healed more than my arm. The words carried weight beyond simple gratitude. Charlotte understood he was offering absolution, releasing her from guilt over surgical choices made in desperation. She'd wounded through her work, but ultimately contributed to justice through that same expertise. She found Ryan waiting outside Seattle Memorial that evening, leaning against expensive car in gathering dusk. His smile was rare thing, genuine warmth breaking through careful control. Charlotte approached, medical bag over shoulder, feeling the weight of past weeks settling into something approaching peace. Dinner? Ryan offered simply. Charlotte nodded, accepting the invitation and everything it implied. They'd both made choices that led to darkness. Both carried scars from decisions made under pressure. But perhaps healing could come through connection. Two damaged people finding wholeness together. The car pulled into traffic smoothly, evening settling over Seattle like surgical drape. Charlotte watched city lights begin twinkling, thinking about oaths broken and redeemed, about faces reflected and identities stolen and recovered. Her hands rested steady in her lap, surgeons' hands that had wounded and healed, destroyed, and saved. Tomorrow she'd return to operating room, putting her skills toward legitimate reconstruction. But tonight belonged to possibility, to the man beside her who'd seen her worst choices, and valued her anyway. The road ahead held uncertainty, but for first time since taking that blood money, Charlotte felt the weight lifting from her chest. Thank you all for following this story. If you enjoyed it, please write in the comments from which place you're watching. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the video. Your support matters and helps me continue creating these stories for you.